Welcome back to the Career Profiles podcast. I'm your host, Sean, and this is part 2 of Wilfredo Bazooka Gomez's career profile. Now, if you haven't listened to part 1, I'm going to give you a brief overview in a moment. But first, before we get into this, I want to let you guys know to please go and subscribe to us across social media. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, on TikTok and YouTube. You can subscribe to us at the BTR Boxing Podcast Network. If you follow us on X, you can at BTR Boxing Pod or at career_profiles to go and find all the latest information about the upcoming podcasts. If you haven't subscribed to us via Spotify or via Apple or any of the other available podcasting apps out there, please do go and do so. Thank you to everybody who continues to leave comments on Spotify about the episodes. I really appreciate the feedback. It is really very welcomed. Also suggestions as well. Thank you so much for firing suggestions over for future episodes of this particular show. So I'm going to get into it now, guys. We're going to go back to part 1 just for a brief synopsis of what we covered in part 1 for those that haven't listened. If you haven't, it's probably a good time to stop and go and listen to the episode. But in part 1, we introduce you to Wilfredo Gomez's life, how he got into this sport, how boxing was always at the forefront of his mind. We also give you his amateur career and how successful he was in his amateur career. And then we moved into his professional career and those that were influential in that upbringing and those that helped him get to the ultimate goal, which was to become a world champion. We leave him at the point in part 1 where he has become a world champion and he successfully defended his title. We've also give you context behind how the 122-pound division was created and how Wilfredo Bazooka Gomez would be a mainstay in that particular division. So now we move into part 2 of his career profile, and we've just left it at the point where he had that debacle of a contest over in Thailand with a guy who shouldn't have really been sharing the ring with him. So now we move into late July of 1978, where the flamboyant promoter, Mr. Dodgy Don King, was hired to work for 3 fighters in a co-promotional role at Madison Square Garden, a move that was precipitated to usher in the new era of boxing and use King's influence to showcase his rising stars. His public spats with former matchmaker Teddy Brenner harboured a frosty relationship. However, King won the approval of MSG Corporation President Sonny Werblin, and did not need Brenner's blessing in order to thrive in this new position. Making the 5th defence of his WBC Super Bantamweight crown, Wilfredo Gomez, now 20-0 with 1 draw on his record, with 20 KOs, faced Dominican Republic native Leonardo Cruz in Hiram Berthon Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico on the 9th of September 1978. Salinas Promotions and Pedro Aponte promoted the bout. Although Gomez envisioned a big payday with Mexican legend Carlos Zarate, which loomed on the horizon, he could not overlook Cruz, who recently earned a decision over Mexican great Lupe Pintor. Leading into the bout, Gomez had relied on the guidance of Plomito Espinosa, who many revered as a Panamanian boxing trainer. A conflict between the trainer and Yamil Chade kept Espinosa away from the ring that evening. Panamanian Federico Plummer was brought in to work Gomez's corner. He said they had differences because of money. Plomito wanted more money than Chade was giving him. He wanted to get paid better. I thought he had earned that money, and it was well deserved. I sided with him because he had taught me a lot of new techniques. Initially, Gomez was preparing to fight Nestor Baba Jimenez, but the Colombian challenger wanted too much money and had outbid himself. So Cruz stepped in to fight instead. Prior to the opening bell, Chade accused the promoter, Pedro Aponte, of favouritism towards Cruz when he approved 8-ounce gloves even though the original contract stipulated 6-ounce gloves. In addition to the glove incident, Gomez, also as usual, was struggling with weight loss heading into the weigh-in, thus the various issues may have caused him severe discomfort before the fight even started. But there were many more subplots surrounding the actions of Pepito Cordero, later a WBA bagman, whose thuggish actions and threats commanded more attention than any boxing or business knowledge. Having earned a reputation as a man with few morals and little character, Cordero was offended when Gomez did not conform to his wishes. He said, Pepito Cordero wanted to promote me for this fight with Carlos Zarate, but I had already had Chide handle everything, so I turned him down. Pepito pressured me to fire Chide and take him on, but I refused. To get me back, he paid my cornermen money to do anything in their capabilities to make me lose by any means. Nick Acosta knew about it. They didn't give me water during the fight or massage my muscles during the fight, and my muscles got sore, and it limited me. Gomez was unsure if Plummer knew anything about the alleged scheme. From the opening bell, Gomez quickly familiarised himself with Cruz, a tall and strong super bantamweight with looping punches and a shotgun right hand. Cruz didn't have a reputation for throwing as many punches as Gomez, but he relied on accurate counter-punching, which became a pattern over the first couple of rounds. In the first round, Cruz employed a sneaky right hand that he shot right from his shoulder. Conversely, he left himself then open for a Gomez left hook. He was tall for a 122-pounder. Cruz then utilised his height advantage as he stayed at a comfortable distance in order to properly land those long right hands. It didn't take long before the fighters had engaged in a brawl. At the outset of the second round, Cruz benefited from the counter-punching roll and landed a vicious uppercut that only managed to back Gomez up a little. Gomez encountered several issues with Cruz and could not bully Cruz to the ropes. Realising that he gave away the second round, Gomez tripled up on jabs and hooks in the third, but got jarred by another uppercut in the midst of the attack. During the round, Gomez proved that he could position Cruz against the ropes and punish him. Although it was not officially called a slip, Gomez actually went down in the fifth. The round emphasised the explosiveness of Gomez as well as the strength of Cruz. Cruz unleashed a new weapon, a short right hand that caught Gomez coming in. In response, Gomez felt the immediacy of battle and ferociously attacked Cruz toward the end of the round. Some fighters proved to be difficult matchups for Gomez, despite their overall skill level. But what made Cruz such a tough opponent was that he never came forward, rarely took a clean punch, and counter-punched effectively. After the fight, Gomez would tell a reporter that he felt like he was being, in his words, taken to get slaughtered. Plus, he was tall at 5'8" and strong with it. Other fighters such as Zarate came to Gomez, so he didn't have to hunt him down. That was not the case with Cruz. Both men had their moments in the 6th and 7th rounds, and Gomez began to go to the body more often. Cruz landed the most significant punch of the 9th round and tried his best to stifle Gomez's body attack in the 11th. It may have been too late, as Gomez thrived on a second wind and used a vicious combination that sent Cruz flailing helplessly at the end of the 12th. Cruz never recovered. In the 13th, Gomez's hook and then short uppercut sent Cruz down at the beginning of the round, and by the time Cruz tried to balance himself, referee Anselmo Escobedo called about 21 seconds in. Some fighters needed to be extended to later rounds to get work. The fight with Cruz did not represent this type of fight. Gomez went to hell and back to dispose of Cruz, who some believed should have not been around that late in the fight. As one writer put it, the Puerto Rican people would never forget this memorable battle, even though Gomez wanted to quickly put it behind him. At this point in his career, every Gomez fight was scrutinised so harshly that he was expected to win easily without any real challenge. Even though the 122-pound division was not teeming with talented fighters, writers agreed that Gomez was a step behind what he should have been at. Boxing journalist Mario Rivera Martino said, "An apparently undertrained Gomez was losing steam at times. You could sense it in his slow-footed movements. People close to Pepito called me after the fight and told me what he tried to do. He tried to sabotage the fight in order for me to lose," said Gomez, "so I wouldn't get the chance to fight with Carlos Zarate." Now, after a hellish showdown with Cruz, critics tried to find a silver lining. People expected Gomez to shine in every performance, and the fierce battle with Cruz was not supposed to be so difficult for him. Rafael Bracero said Leo Cruz was not a great boxer, but he knew how to deal with adversity. Gomez, still young, was not at his best before that fight, but he showed me something. With Gomez, it was like, you have to kill me. You saw that fight. That was important. He didn't think Cruz could beat him, but even a slow pitcher can beat you if you're not prepared. The next fight changed everything for Gomez. It put him in a different stratosphere regarding his place in the sport. It was one of those fights where the rabid Mexican and Puerto Rican fans expected all hell to break loose. Fixated on the middle of the ring, fans in the Roberto Clemente Coliseum in San Juan, Puerto Rico, appeared ready to explode. A wave of excitement spread through the venue. That same passion would only intensify as the fight took hold. Many boxing experts would look back to this bout as the precursor to the popular Mexican-Puerto Rican boxing rivalry. The enmity was fueled by Gomez, who had earned a reputation for dousing the fire of Mexican challengers, the most recent a 7th-round stoppage of Mexico's Juan Antonio Lopez in April 1978. In addition, that April, Carlos Zarate doused Puerto Rico's Poppy Hernandez in 13 rounds in the Roberto Clemente Coliseum. Now, nearly 5 months later, Gomez was making his 6th title defence and successfully chartering a path to greatness. An opponent inextricably linked with Mexico's past boxing giants, Carlos Zarate, entered with a record of 52 victories, no losses, with 51 knockouts. Gomez was set to earn $150,000 for the defence. Mauricio Sullivan said, "I remember the huge expectations for this bout. Zarate faced off with Alfonso Zamora in 1977, and they were both undefeated. It was a tremendous fight, and Zarate won. When that fight with Wilfredo was made, it was a huge step for Zarate to go up in weight. It was a great opportunity for him because Wilfredo was incredibly powerful." To add to the fervour surrounding the bout, Gomez and Zarate had a combined record of 73-0 with 1 draw, with an astonishing 72 knockouts. Similarly, when Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard met in 1980, they combined for a record of 98-1, but lacked the same impressive knockout ratio. Physically, Zarate stood 2 inches taller than Gomez, but lacked the same fluid movement and speed. Zarate relied on power in both hands and would be in hot pursuit of the knockout punch. Comparatively, Gomez had confidence that his pressure and ability to adapt to any challenge would be the key. For Gomez, there was no hurry. In his mind, the knockout would eventually come. What was different in this bout was the brilliance of Zarate. Experts noted that Zarate was supposed to win and could possibly knock out the young champion. Gomez had never been faced with such possibilities. In fact, some Puerto Rican sports writers attempted to talk him out of the historic showdown, citing that he was too green for Zarate. Rafael Bracero said, "The Zarate fight was the best fight that could be made at that time, and Zarate was favoured against Gomez. I remember telling him to kill him early, or it would be bad for him." Bracero was not the only one who was concerned about Zarate's edge in power and experience. Puerto Rican journalist Mario Rivera Martino said that Wilfredo would need a more rigorous training programme than heretofore. Whilst other insiders were already looking towards a colossal showdown between Zarate and lightweight king Roberto Duran, thus they assumed that Gomez was little more than a stepping stone. Yamil Chade set up camp for Gomez at the Holiday Inn in Isla Verde and kept close tabs on him. With the uptick of adoring fans, Chade could not take any chances in the biggest fight of his boxer's career. Plamito Espinosa and Enrique Carrion handled the training as Gomez trained out of the Malta Corona gym on Fernandez Juncos Avenue in Sanctuary. By the time Gomez closed out camp, he was in the best condition of his life. Zarate could not say the same as he coped with health issues. Within a day of the big fight, Zarate went to see the WBC-appointed Dr. Elias Cordoba at Hotel Caribe regarding his health. He was suffering from monga, a severe cold. After a consultation, Cordoba gave Zarate a clean bill of health and confirmed that the Mexican was in fine condition to face Gomez. Still, the rumours persisted after the fight ended, and, for some Mexican fans, could be used as a viable excuse for the performance of their great champion. Heading into this bout, Zarate was facing a young champion so driven and focused that the hurdle was nearly insurmountable. Fighting Gomez at home was a nightmare for any opponent. Beating him was impossible. If Zarate wanted to turn it into a war, Gomez could have matched his power. If Zarate wanted to box, Gomez proved too much, too quick for him. And if Zarate wanted to be the aggressor, Gomez was masterful as a counterpuncher. When Gomez learned something new, a defensive tactic for instance, he immediately worked the move into his repertoire. Most fighters did not have that capability. Jorge Marquez, Gomez's cousin and lawyer, said he was already a great fighter. He was the leading boxer and considered the biggest show in Puerto Rico. During this time, he was very disciplined. He would wake up early and do his exercises. He was already strict and organised because of his history in amateur boxing. Leading up to the Zarate fight, Wilfredo had developed well. Nobody thought he would even knock down Zarate. Zarate was a KO king. The weigh-in was held the day of the fight at the Roberto Clemente Coliseum. Few could have predicted the narratives that had begun to develop. Chide said Zarate, who was going up in weight, had to try 4 times to make 122 pounds. Meanwhile, Gomez hit the maximum weight at the second try in one of the noisiest and crowded weigh-ins that had taken place at the Roberto Clemente Coliseum. Rumour had it that Zarate had a code. He looked emancipated, pale, and more bony than usual. Gomez, on the contrary, had the looks of a miniature Hercules with his well-defined muscles and, more importantly, a high degree of confidence. Neither fighter made the 122-pound limit on the first attempt, as both weighed over 124 pounds. In fact, Zarate needed 4 trips to the scales to make 122. No one could have envisioned a more attractive storyline. Gomez, replete in the Puerto Rican red, white and blue, bounced across the ring from the destructive Mexican king. Zarate, looking comfortable, shook out his arms. Handlers attending, Gomez-Zarate needed no pre-fight instructions. Zarate had an aura that demanded respect, but Gomez was not willing to allot it to him. Intimidation was not part of the equation. Gomez would be smart, not careless, and he would be calculating, not chaotic. And when Zarate let down his guard, bang. As Plamito Espinosa motioned his fingers for Gomez to spin away, Gomez merely looked ahead without giving him any acknowledgement. Only one man deserved his attention. That was Carlos Zarate. When the bell rang on the 28th of October 1978, neither fighter looked to set a blistering pace. Zarate and Gomez took turns as the aggressor. Instead of coming forward, Gomez appeared comfortable in the counter-puncher role. As Zarate stalked, Gomez flitted in and out of his punching range. Eventually, Gomez's confidence grew when he landed the first significant punch of the fight. It occurred when Gomez countered Zarate with a straight right and then eased him into a lunging left hook. Both fighters spent a good portion of the first round devising a clear strategy to get inside. Patiently, each fighter embraced this more passive approach over the first 3 rounds. Although Gomez was more effective landing an overhand right, Zarate opted for a left uppercut thrown from below his waist. Every time Gomez landed a punch, the Puerto Rican fans rose in thunderous applause. It was not just typical nationalistic pride on hand, but a boxing fan base that was as knowledgeable as any in the world. To them, Gomez was packaged so perfectly, wrapped in a quilt stitched together by the best qualities of the country's greatest champions. Something was different with Gomez, as he was a fascinating elixir of grace and power who fostered action at nearly every moment of the fight. Even when he was not punching, it was hard to take one's eyes off him because he was so assertive in his movements. He never wasted a movement. Gomez said, "I was studying Zarate in that first round. I had to keep the distance and be cautious of his right hand." Shuffling to his left in the second round, Gomez charged Zarate with a wild left hook that missed its mark. Both men traded harmless jabs, but neither was willing to take a risk that may have opened them up for a counter. Surprisingly, Gomez pulled back with his punches and often feinted as if to prepare an onslaught, but it never materialised. With 43 seconds remaining in the round, Gomez cornered Zarate. Despite only landing a glancing blow with his right hand, Gomez followed it up with a left hook that woke Zarate up. As the bell sounded, Gomez shoved one more right hand in Zarate's face, but the Mexican champ just ignored him. He was not one to let his opponent get under his skin. Toward the end of the third round, Gomez beautifully set Zarate up with a lazy left and then immediately closed the gap with a jolting right hand that landed directly above Zarate's guard. Amid a torrent of fans itching for the typical Gomez attack, the champion had still not yet unleashed his blend of speed and power. Early in the fourth, Gomez was content to fight going backwards and let Zarate come to him. Mixing in a check left hook and an occasional jab, Gomez disrupted Zarate's game plan. Susceptible to left hooks and an occasional straight right, Gomez hadn't completely deciphered the Mexican legend's style. Still, Gomez recovered to land a lead hook that sent Zarate to the canvas toward the end of the round. Zarate took a standing 8 and immediately began to take more punishment. Gomez followed him to the other ring post and cautiously looked for an opening. Seconds later, he found one, a clean right hand that staggered Zarate. Not finished, Gomez followed him to the middle of the ring, where he sent him down for a second time with a glancing right hand after the bell. Referee Harry Gibbs stepped in to start the count, but Zarate had risen, and Gomez ran over to him to land one more left hook. Gomez's intensity reached its peak as he refused to sit in his corner, anxiously awaiting the chance to end the fight. Continuing the onslaught in the fifth and final round, Gomez landed 3 hooks, the last a glancing blow off Zarate's head. Then Gomez moved Zarate to the ropes with a right hand to his ear, where he landed the same uncontested, vicious left hook that sent him down a round earlier. Seconds later, Gomez sent Zarate through the ropes as Gibbs made a half-hearted attempt to step in. Gomez had been accused of fighting dirty against Zarate, but those charges were unfounded. Sure, he occasionally landed a shot below the belt, but to him, to call him a dirty fighter would be unfair and unjustified. Most fans would probably have called Bazooka a great fighter. Gomez said, "When Zarate went down and I struck him again, that happened because I was fired up. Remember, I was fighting a guy who was said to be so great, so invincible. All I kept thinking, when he came out for round 5 was, finish him." The fight was stopped at 44 seconds of the 5th when Gomez knocked Zarate down again and then viciously stepped in to land a straight right as Zarate crawled on his knees. Zarate's brother Jorge threw in the towel even before Gibbs began the count. In the end, Zarate, a courageous warrior, wilted under the extreme pressure that Gomez applied. As soon as the towel was thrown, the celebration began. After the explosive victory over Zarate, Gomez reached a new level of celebrity status. He had beaten Zarate so decisively that even the excuses coming from Zarate's camp that he was sick during the bout didn't hold any real weight. Zarate was a beast at 52-0 with 51 KOs, said Puerto Rican journalist Carlos Nevarez. You had a young kid like Wilfredo who was 21-0. It was insane. There were some people from Puerto Rico who didn't believe he could beat Zarate. There was a good vibe that Wilfredo would make a good fight. This night, for the first time in history, both Coliseums were completely sold out. The fight was held at Roberto Clemente Coliseum, but the other side, Hiram Bethorn, was also sold out. People who couldn't buy tickets stayed in the streets or shopping malls. One friend said they stopped the movie he was watching to announce Wilfredo Gomez just beat Carlos Zarate. When they announced it, people went wild. According to some local journalist, referee Harry Gibbs' actions throughout the fight warranted notice. A local reporter said, although Zarate went down 5 times, Gibbs only counted 3 of them. The style of Gibbs sapped some of the brilliance of the bout. Gibbs also took a point away from Gomez for hitting Zarate while he was intending to get back to his feet. Several boxing insiders criticised Gibbs for his handling of the bout. Additionally, Gomez, at his absolute peak, felt that he was facing 2 opponents as he never caught a break from the referee. Gomez said, "He was very slow. When Zarate fell down, he came over and gave him extra time. The ref and everybody else were protecting Zarate, but nobody was going to take that fight away from me. I was fighting with Puerto Rico, so I felt confident." Fans and experts alike knew what they had watched and recognised boxing genius when they witnessed it. Because of the one-sided nature of the bout, there was little talk about a rematch. Gomez said, "He didn't want to face me again." Years later, when asked about the fight and the Mexican versus Puerto Rican rivalry, Carlos Zarate said, "I was not feeling well and in bad condition. I think if I was healthy, it would have been a good fight, with me possibly winning." The talk in boxing circles still revolved around a showdown between Gomez and Danny Little Red Lopez, and since the WBC had asserted that the champion in the lower division would be allotted the number 1 ranking in the higher weight class, that ruling put Gomez in the driver's seat to face Lopez. Other featherweights, such as Ruben Castillo and Eusebio Pedrosa, were enticing matchups in the future, but the head-on collision between Gomez and Lopez seemed inevitable. As tough as Lopez was, a strategical match with Gomez was not in his favour. At the peak of his career, Gomez had no glaring weaknesses. Often big punchers suffer in other areas, but Gomez could punch and skillfully use his defence to offset the most offensive-minded opponents. Excuses range from Zarate's sickness to Gomez's dirty tactics to the inability of Zarate to make weight. None aggravated Gomez as he looked ahead. The fight itself earned plaudits as one of the top 5 fights in 1978 by The Ring magazine. Many argued that Gomez, who went 5-0 with 5 knockouts in 1978, deserved top billing as Ring's best fighter that year. Although Gomez had become a household name in Puerto Rico and the rest of Latin America, he still needed to establish himself in the US, and since he didn't speak English, it was not always an easy sell. Promoter Don King had cornered the market on Latin fighters and had also begun to work with Sonny Werblin at Madison Square Garden. Soon enough, Gomez would make his Garden debut. To him, the sacred boxing haven was rivalled only by the prestigious Roberto Clemente Coliseum. Puerto Ricans would come out in droves to see him in the Mecca of boxing. After cutting ties with Carlos Ileta, Gomez signed to fight Nestor Jimenez on the 9th of March 1979. He was merely closing out the division that he had built and maintained. Gomez was at his physical peak as a fighter here. There was not another boxer in the world like him, and he wasn't afraid to let the world know how good he was when he said, "In all modesty, I consider myself what they call the best pound-for-pound boxer in the world. I consider myself a complete boxer." On the undercard, Slick Salmambe challenged Norman Goins. Jimenez entered the bout with a record of 68-12 with 2 draws and would receive $15,000 for his services. Conversely, Gomez garnered $100,000 for the bout. The Colombian challenger, who hailed from Catenegra, had fought most of his bouts in Colombia against mediocre opposition. Gomez presented new challenges for him. Ring magazine correspondent Arthur Rembert would refer to Gomez as the hottest attraction on the island of Puerto Rico, which includes Wilfredo Benitez and Sammy Serrano. Now, although Jimenez was in front of him, Gomez salivated at waging battle with featherweight champion Danny Lopez. For several reasons. The Lopez bout eluded Gomez, and it left him restless. He said, "It would be a hard fight. I have grown to be a natural 126-pounder, and I have been dreaming of a Lopez fight ever since I knocked out Carlos Zarate last October. Lopez is very tall for his weight, and he hits hard, but his chin is weak. When other people knock him down, he gets up. When I knock him down, if he gets up, I will attack him like a tiger." Gomez recognised from the start that Jimenez, who came into their fight with more than 80 belts to his name, couldn't possibly hurt him. Despite draining himself during an exhausting but successful attempt to lose 6.5 pounds to get down to 122, Gomez didn't let the ill-advised weight issue affect his focus. Still, a writer described Gomez's first-round performance as if his Rolls Royce was double-parked. By the second round, Gomez uncovered the experienced Jimenez's flaws. One of them was that he often went back to the ropes and positioned himself there. Using deft head movement, Gomez landed a fierce right hand toward the end of the round and then continued to hunt Jimenez, who showed a penchant for taking punishment and moving forward. To close out the round, Gomez hurt Jimenez with 2 vicious uppercuts that Jimenez became susceptible to throughout the remainder of the fight. Was this the type of fight Gomez needed after knocking out his last 22 challengers? After taking down Zarate, Gomez did not have to face a top 10 fighter immediately, but Jimenez provided no real resistance. The pummeling continued. Gomez bounced Jimenez off the ropes with a left hook to start the 4th round and then stood in front of his opponent, content to measure him. Gomez stopped moving, as he had done in previous rounds, and looked for that one big punch. Nevertheless, Jimenez did not stay dormant and fought back until he walked into 2 more right-hand uppercuts that made him hesitant to stay on the same path. After landing several borderline blows, Gomez began to abuse Jimenez. First, he powered a right hand through Jimenez's guard and then rallied again with an uppercut, a straight right hand, and then a left and right combination that violently snapped back Jimenez's head. It was the type of punch that made the referees pay particular attention to the following punches. The beating didn't stop there, as Jimenez made his best move of the fight by turning away from a fierce right cross that would have easily ended the fight. The vicious side of Gomez was on display. The compassionate side of referee Perez was not. "Since I am a boxer, my blood is hot, and I can't always be on guard to everything in the ring," Gomez told a reporter. "This is why there is a referee, to notice and correct any errors. It's his responsibility. I am busy fighting, not reading the rule book." As courageous as Jimenez was, no fighter could have absorbed such a pronounced beating. They started to brawl at the beginning of the 5th round. In the same round, after untangling himself from Jimenez's grasp, Gomez followed him to the corner to land a vicious left hook from a distance, followed by a right cross and an uppercut. Somehow Jimenez still didn't succumb. Seconds after being admonished by referee Tony Perez, Jimenez took another left hook, stumbled, and, already off balance, went down from a second left hook that grazed his ear. Up at the count of 7, Jimenez's corner had already thrown in the towel before Perez brought the men back together. Going into the bout, Jimenez had won 23 straight fights and never backed down from facing top competition. After the conclusion, Gomez expressed his regret at his own lack of proper training for the bout, and he told a reporter, "I am not in great shape. It's extremely disappointing for me. I was in good condition, but losing all that weight took something out of me." Then Gomez called out Danny Lopez as he envisioned the purses that the fight would garner in the US, demanding, "I want Lopez now." Having passed the biggest test at 122 pounds 4 months earlier, Gomez could relax, knowing he had silenced one of the best fighters in the world in Mexico's Carlos Zarate. Surprisingly, the talk of a rematch with Zarate never intensified. Experts have their own theory on that prospect and why it faded. Moreover, Gomez only needed 5 rounds to stop a fighter who many felt was invincible. It would have been the perfect time for Gomez to sit back and enjoy the spoils of his hard work. Carlos Navarez said Wilfredo moved on. There was no reason for a rematch. He was more focused on defending his title. That was when the name of Salvador Sanchez was the one that people were starting to hear. Wilfredo was a very good fighter, but he started to believe that he was the best. When you have a person like Wilfredo, with all of his glory, and you can have whatever you want, all of this may have had him make things that aren't right. Fortunately, Gomez's loyal Puerto Rican fans didn't need to worry about a letdown, as Gomez continued defending his title at a rapid pace. Unlike some less active champions, Gomez felt a responsibility to defend his WBC crown. Coming into the bout against Nicaragua's Julio Hernandez, his 8th as champion, Gomez was eyeing Roberto Duran's record of 11 straight successful title defences by knockout. Undefeated in 1979, Gomez only needed 7 rounds to defeat Nestor Baba Jimenez in his 7th title defence, and Nelson Cruz Tamares in a non-title scrap on the 21st of May. In a nondescript card promoted by Gil Clancy that brought in 10,000 mostly Gomez supporters, Bazooka faced Tamares in his first bout at the featherweight limit. More importantly, Gomez and the legendary trainer Gil Clancy worked together to bring legendary singer Ira Chacon to memorise the crowd before the title fight. The scintillating gyrations of Chacon along the surreal punching power of Gomez made for an enticing blend. He came into the fight at 125 pounds. Cruz Tamares weighed in at 126 and a quarter. Gomez had returned to the Garden for the second time in 3 months and ransacked Tamares in 2 rounds. Gomez set Tamares up for the overhand right by going to the body with his left hook. Gomez's punch started as a hook but looked more like an uppercut as it landed just above the belt line. Tamares rolled onto his stomach in pain. Referee Tony Perez counted to 10 and stopped the bout in the second round. Garnering higher purses, Gomez earned $140,000 for his short work. Then he set his sights on Nicaraguan Julio Raton Hernandez. That June, in a non-title bout that was aired on CBS Sports Spectacular alongside a showdown between Ernesto Espana and Claude Noel. With only 5 wins on his record, Hernandez's claim to fame was twice going the distance with a young Alexis Arguello and fighting well against him. Whatever threat Hernandez posed, Gomez had already begun to look past him as he signed his next title defence with Carlos Mendoza for the September prior to the bout. In 1979, the super bantamweight division lacked fighters who could legitimately challenge Gomez. Few fighters in any division could compare with Gomez. Talks for a rematch with Zarate had already faded as Zarate turned his attention to the bantamweight's Lupe Pintor. Still, by all accounts, Zarate had not forgotten about Gomez. He wants Gomez more than Lopez, said Jorge Zarate, Carlos's brother. On June the 16th, 1979, Gomez stepped into the ring with a focus that belied previous performances. Lacking the cautious nature that he showed early against Zarate, Gomez fought as if he knew Hernandez could never threaten him. Gomez thrived on the fact that no fighter in the world could beat him, and over the first couple of rounds with Hernandez, the champion took his time. Visualising his approach for the coming rounds, Gomez practiced his feints, positioning, step-over moves and any cute defensive moves that piqued his interest. Every movement of the first 6 minutes was dictated by Gomez, who mostly glided through the rounds. Offensively, what Gomez did concentrate on over the first 2 rounds was his left uppercut, followed by a left hook to the body. It may have been the most lethal combination in all of boxing in 1979, especially when Gomez tripled up on the hooks. However, heading into the 3rd round, Gomez was still easing his way into the bout. Occasionally, Gomez would absorb clean shots from Hernandez, but nothing fazed the champ. Indifferent to anything, Hernandez countered with Gomez, who would casually reset and then move forward. The speed and focus returned toward the middle of the 3rd when Gomez unleashed his best combination, a hook to the body, an uppercut off the hook, and another hook to the head. 2 rounds later, Hernandez was still on his feet, throwing that counter left hook. But the old Gomez was back. Seconds after round 5 began, Gomez rushed Hernandez. Eager to get him out, Gomez landed a right hand that grazed Hernandez's head, followed by a pulverising right that sent his opponent stumbling. Rising at the count of 9 and not discouraged, Hernandez fired back, but subsequently went down again from the force of a right hand. Zealously, Hernandez returned again with the same vigour, determined to prove to Gomez that he was not to be taken lightly. In fact, Hernandez even pushed Gomez back. Despite the surge, Hernandez couldn't make it out of the round. Too quick and potent, Gomez moved Hernandez to the corner and inflicted damage as a left uppercut sent Hernandez tumbling forward. As soon as Hernandez went down the 3rd time, referee Henry Elsperu called the bout. It was not Gomez's best defence, but he didn't disappoint, as he went into the fight knowing exactly how much energy and effort needed to be exerted, and recorded an easy victory. Hernandez said, "It was the left hooks to the body that had me going." Ironically, not only was Gomez chasing stardom and Roberto Duran's record of 10 consecutive title defences, but he also watched Ernesto Espana beat Claude Noel in a 13th-round stoppage in the main undercard leading into his bout with Hernandez. In the 9th defence of Wilfredo Gomez's WBC Super Bantamweight title, the Puerto Rican champion faced Panama's Carlos Mendoza at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas on the 29th of September 1979. On the same card, Sugar Ray Leonard, Larry Holmes and Roberto Duran all made appearances, with Holmes versus Ernie Shavers headlining. If the name sounds familiar to fight fans at the time, Mendoza was the opponent chosen to challenge a young Roberto Duran in his 4-round professional debut, which Duran won by unanimous decision. Prior to the bout, however, it was impossible to avoid the distractions. Gomez publicly challenged promoter Don King, who acknowledged that with the list of superstars on the card, Gomez might be pushed off the ABC televised portion of the card. Only 3 of the bouts would be televised. As reported in a newspaper article headed "King Applies Massage to Big Egos," Gomez wanted answers when he bluntly asked, "Am I important?" King's response was, "Of course you are. You're a star." Gomez said, "Then how come I'm not on television?" "Who told you that?" replied King. "Well, I wasn't mentioned on the TV promo. My people in Puerto Rico are worried that they won't see me on TV." "Wilfredo, there are 3 hours of TV time. Because you are in a title bout, you are scheduled for 15 rounds. We are committed for the possibility of going 15 rounds with Holmes Shavers. We can't be committed for the possibility of another 15-round fight too. But tell me, Wilfredo, how long do you think your bout will last?" 4 rounds, said Wilfredo. "But no matter how long your bout lasts, it will be videotaped and put on TV when the opportunity occurs. You're a star, Wilfredo." The bickering between King and Gomez harbinged a frosty relationship at times, but for the most part, Gomez was able to cope with King's shadowy dealings. Unlike most fighters, Gomez took a proactive role in the business side of his career and even did research to understand the nuances of a contract. Further into his career, Gomez would often bring a posse of business advisors and lawyers and sit at the negotiating table with King or another promoter to establish a purse that met his standards. Yet Gomez was also fighting the after effects of the antibiotics that he was taking for an infection, as they significantly weakened him. In addition, Gomez needed to lose 8 pounds in the week leading up to the fight. He landed in Las Vegas 10 pounds over the weight limit and relied on a liquid diet to eventually make the weight. Going into the bout, Mendoza's record was deceiving. At 38-12 with 4 draws, Mendoza appeared to be a fighter on the decline. It was rare that a fighter with multiple losses threatened Gomez, but one statistic stood out. Mendoza was undefeated in his previous 20 bouts leading up to the title shot. Ironically, Mendoza, the number 3 ranked super bantamweight, had stopped countryman Jacinto Fuentes in 9 rounds prior to facing Gomez. It was the same Fuentes who fought to a draw with Gomez in the Puerto Rican's professional debut. Still struggling to make the 122-pound weight limit, Gomez, 25-0-1 with 25 KOs, survived an unusual ebb and flow where he gave away some middle to late rounds. Gomez made 122 pounds exactly, while Mendoza landed at 120.5. Between rounds of this action-packed fight, Gomez saw exactly what was unravelling in front of him, so much so that he ran back to his corner yelling, "Next round, he falls." Going into the 10th round, Mendoza was not ignorant to the idiosyncrasies of a prize fight. It was impossible to ignore the axiom that anything can happen, and often did in a 15-round bout. Few could have predicted the unusual events that occurred in the 10th round. Unfortunately for Mendoza, one incident that he had no control over may have irreparably changed his boxing fate. After fighting well in the 8th and 9th rounds against one of the top 2 fighters in the world, he had to cope with a cut glove. Actually, it appeared as a thumb-sized hole on the outer part of Gomez's Everlast glove on his right hand. Referee Richard Green pulled Gomez aside at the beginning of the 10th to inspect it further. Green brought the glove to a ringside observer, much to Mendoza's chagrin. What was occurring only served to strengthen Gomez, who benefited greatly from the reprieve. When the action continued, a recharged Gomez hurried to meet Mendoza in the middle of the ring. After a flurry of punches, which mostly missed their mark, Gomez connected with a right hand directly on Mendoza's jaw and knocked him down. It was the first knockdown of the round, and Mendoza returned to his feet before Green's 8 count. Those close to Gomez knew he was not fighting his typical fight. As tough as Mendoza was, he should have not looked as good as he did over those first 9 rounds. Not in his best shape, Gomez had to search for that final reservoir of strength in the same way he had to do against Leo Cruz. His trainer said, one way or another, the glove got a hole in it. The referee had to stop the fight. He took the glove to the supervisor, who then stuck his finger into that hole and made it bigger. They then stopped the fight there and then to get a new glove. After a long break, I tell Wilfredo, go over there and knock him out quickly. You have to jump on him. Wilfredo was tired, and that gave him a breather. But Mendoza didn't have much left either. When the supervisor went to look for gloves, Wilfredo got his wind back. Few fighters in any era knew how to finish with the same ferocity as Gomez. Making a beeline towards Mendoza, Gomez reeled off another flurry of combinations. Once again, only a couple of punches landed cleanly, but the damage was done as the second right hand sent Mendoza down again and knocked his mouthpiece out. Courageously, Mendoza rose again and furiously tried to put his mouthpiece back in. At the same time, Gomez recognised the opportunity and slammed another right hand on the top of the mouthpiece. Somehow, Mendoza, with his protection finally secured, became aware of the imminent danger. In the last 20 seconds, the Panamanian made an ill-advised call for Gomez to come to him, got bounced off the ropes by serious Gomez combinations, and in the last stage of the fight, got his head jarred back in a frightening fashion by a right hand. By clinching Gomez after that punch, Mendoza did 2 things. He may have saved years on his career, and he gave Green enough time to step between the men and wave off the bout at 2 minutes and 29 seconds of the 10th round. Talk of an investigation into the cut glove became the focal point after the bout. However, Gomez was already discussing his next title defence. Gomez, who developed a nice rapport with Sugar Ray Leonard, earned $175,000, while Duran and Leonard earned $100,000 and $300,000 respectively. He surprised me, said Gomez of Mendoza's gutsy performance, but there was more to it. Gomez relied on a litany of excuses that deflated any excitement surrounding the final knockout. Through his interpreter, Gomez resigned. That fellow did not use any specific tactics, so it was very difficult to cope with him. I was sure I would take him out in 3 or 4 rounds, but the fight went much longer because I was weak from my diet to make the weight. Surprisingly, on the same card, Duran fought a below-average performance over the unheralded Ceferino Gonzalez, while Sugar Ray Leonard made quick work of Andy Price with a first-round knockout. Duran and Leonard were on a collision course, and Duran's unimpressive unanimous decision win left him disgusted and motivated to impress in his next two bouts. What was even more impressive about Gomez was that he was not just a boxer. He actually dabbled in real estate and started his own company, Bazooka Enterprises, that later went defunct. So he negotiated a deal with Paul Guez from Sasson, and as his own manager negotiated fights on his own behalf. Although Gomez relied on a revolving door of lawyers and advisors, he had replaced Yamil Chade with lawyer Gabi Penegracino, who would receive a salary from Gomez and felt like Gomez could be more productive by inserting himself as a manager. Penegracino said, "In the classic sense, a boxer always needed a manager to serve as his surrogate brain. The manager had to make up for the fighter's intellectual shortcomings. Wilfredo has no such shortcomings. He has a brain. Although Yamil Chade would never be mistaken for a saint, he was brilliant at deflecting the attention away from Gomez where it was needed." A newspaper article came out where Chade publicly questioned Penegracino for undermining him. Of the controversy and subsequent news piece, Gomez recalled, "Chade brought Penegracino to me as a legal advisor. Penegracino advised me that Chade wasn't necessary and was charging me too much money. Penegracino was only trying to protect me, and he did a great job of it." Despite Penegracino's strengths, Chade was gone, and so was his magnificent ability to do everything that made Gomez's life easier. Financially, Chade's occasional underhand dealings angered Gomez, but before Penegracino came along, the champion was willing to overlook those transgressions to see the bigger picture. A big reason why Gomez was in the driver's seat at 122 pounds was due to Chade's connection with Jose Sulaiman, his keen eye at directing Gomez's career and his ability to share the headlines with Gomez. Although Penegracino was serviceable, he was also limited. Yet Gomez, at times impressionable, allowed Penegracino to take the reins. He said, "When Chade made himself the centre of attention, it was a big relief because I could completely focus and concentrate on the fight. It was a bad decision to try and later negotiate fights on my own." As for his decision to let Chade go, Gomez, who early on considered him a father figure, said, "It was business, and that is how it is in boxing." Ironically, Penegracino entered the fray with Chade's help. When Wilfred Benitez fought Carlos Palomino in San Juan on the 14th of January 1979, Penegracino was attending the fight with a friend of Gomez's, who also knew Chade. That evening, Penegracino would meet Gomez and a relationship would take hold. "I had met Yamil Chade through Jose Sulaiman," said Penegracino. "I remember that Chade had started a relationship with Gomez during the World Amateur Championships in Havana, Cuba. So I met Wilfredo at the Benitez fight. I was introduced to him by a friend, Nono Gallardo. Everyone knew Nono. He had become acquainted with Gomez. He had a personality larger than life, and he came to me and he said, 'I think you should meet Wilfredo.' 8 months later, Penegracino got a call from Chade about the glove issue that wouldn't go away after the fight with Mendoza. He said, 'I remember that Wilfredo was in dire straits during that fight. The referee noticed that Wilfredo had a cut on his glove. The referee stops the fight and orders that new gloves be brought in. At that time, the commission didn't carry gloves. Both fighters rested, and when the fighters were called back again, Mendoza thought that Wilfredo was in the same position. That's when Wilfredo went after him and eventually knocked him out. Mendoza's trainer, Cuyo Hernandez, refused to let that glove incident die, and he filed a complaint with the WBC, citing that the gloves were cut purposely to give Gomez a rest. So the issue was whether Gomez was going to be stripped of his title or not. Gomez's team stuck by its assertion that the glove was either damaged by a forceful blow or the leather was defective. According to Penegracino, the gloves were given to Bobby Goodman, the son of Murray Goodman, then the public relations representative for Everlast, the company which made the damaged gloves. What happened next was the first move that made Gomez realise how good Penegracino was at handling difficult situations. Penegarciano said. The Nevada Commission gave the gloves to Bobby Goodman. Goodman was supposed to give the gloves to the laboratory to determine if they were cut by a sharp object or the glove had just split. They called for a hearing at which each side would present evidence on whether or not the WBC would strip Wilfredo. It was the first time I would support Wilfredo. The hearing was in Casablanca. My position was that, first of all, I told the members, how do we know that this was even the glove that Wilfredo used, since it was given to Bobby Goodman, who gave it to Murray, and then it was sent to the laboratory? I asked if Everlast would admit that its glove was defective. Then I told them, no one really knows what happened. On that basis, the complaint was dismissed. Then Wilfredo asked me if I could represent him as an attorney. Recognising Chiday's influence, Gomez was reluctant to banish him completely from the team and would even consider bringing him back later on in his career in a bigger role. It was not unusual for boxers to create a competitive atmosphere by funneling trainers in and out of their careers, but Gomez was setting an unusual precedent by hiring and firing advisors, managers and lawyers at a rapid clip. Chiday had put him in position to merge Gomez's talents with his likability, but in Wilfredo's eyes, he did not do enough. He said, Yamil was responsible for Gomez not being established in the States. He didn't go to the US, he said, to make contacts. He wanted me to fight anywhere but the US. For instance, he had me fight in Japan. I understood that the Americans didn't like that weight class, and he was not attractive there, but when I got exposure in the US, they wanted to see me even more. Still, Gomez did not feel that he suffered in any capacity, with Penegarciano handling the finances. He trusted Penegarciano from the beginning. Those close to Gomez never doubted his loyalty to his friends, even though several commented on how difficult he could be to deal with. Sure, Gomez would make ill-advised decisions, but he never made them with ill intent. Instead, he was only trying to put himself in a better position. Penegarciano said, I never had a professional relationship on the basis of a percentage of fights. I viewed him as a client of mine on the basis of an hourly fee. I also charged him for expenses. I was not acting as his manager. This partnership went on for many years. What I would do was mainly work with Don King. He would tell me he wants Wilfredo to fight so-and-so. I would ask Wilfredo, what do you want to earn? And he would give me a number. I would get that number, go to King and try and get it. I would get the contract signed and bill him for my time. Chiday's contract ran out, but he still acted as a go-between with the WBC. But he was no longer involved in negotiating Wilfredo's contract. Penegarciano would go on to say as well, at that time there weren't any deals for a percentage of TV rights. We never negotiated like that. Simply, Don King would pay his purse and for the father of the fighter or any friends who wanted to stay at the hotel. Despite the fact that Penegarciano tolerated King, most fighters and managers did not have a similar experience. He used threats and intimidations to wield his power, and for some reason, Gomez was not privy to that same bravado and callousness. Penegarciano said, King was the shrewdest negotiator I ever met. He was a ruthless negotiator, and there was not a boxer who was under contract with him that spoke well of him. King never tried to nickel and dime us. He tried to deduct expenses a couple of times, but he paid Wilfredo what he had to. We never had a falling out, as many fighters do. Gomez found his way back to Madison Square Garden less than a month after allowing Mono Mendoza to stick around for 10 rounds in the previous defence. Don King continued to hold court at the Garden, and he matched Gomez up with Nicky Perez, who was an inexperienced 19-year-old fighter but ranked number 6 by the WBC. Perez hailed from Tucson, Arizona, and came in with a record of 42 victories with 1 loss and 24 knockouts. Conversely, Gomez had established himself as an indomitable champion whose 26 career victories all ended in knockouts. Working in his favour, the 3 knockdown rule was in effect for the bout. With Penegarciano taking the reins, as his lawyer, Gomez could focus on his opponent. However, Perez, in Penegarciano's mind, had dug his own grave. He said Nicky Perez followed him around from fight to fight and called him out. He was saying, Wilfredo Gomez is afraid of me. The only thing that he had going for him was his mouth. Wilfredo finally said, I want that fight. I'll fight back. Gomez wanted $100,000 for that fight, and he wanted to get rid of him. When the fight was announced, a lot of writers were asking, why is Gomez fighting this bum? Why is he wasting his time with this nobody? In addition to Gomez's continued dominance, he was actually closing in on Roberto Duran's record of knockouts in consecutive title defences. At £135, Duran had made 10 consecutive knockout defences. Gomez would equal that record if he knocked out Perez. The record would only add to the allure that followed the Golden Boy Gomez, whose face reached from the sports pages to the front page in Puerto Rico. He was the matinee idol and he revelled in it. "I am very popular in Puerto Rico," he told a reporter. "I am known no matter where I go. It makes me very happy and proud that my people accept me and speak of me in such terms of greatness. I just hope I can live up to their expectations of me." Gomez, as the draw, received $125,000 as Perez settled for $17,500. Gomez, who trained at Gleason's gym and the Times Square gym, again struggled to make the £122 exactly, while Perez weighed 120. The weigh-in started at 11 a.m. at the Felt Forum. When Gomez came to weigh himself earlier, he was still half a pound over. The news, of course, was not shocking to Gomez's camp. After jumping rope and shadow boxing, Gomez came back to weigh 122. Famished, Gomez told a reporter, "Now I can eat," and he consumed orange juice, part of a steak, beef broth, tomato salad and ice cream. In preparation, Perez was relegated to Bufano's gym in Jersey City, New Jersey. The attendance for the fight was 9,054, a slight disappointment since it did not even fill half of the venue. Managed by Beto Martinez, Perez fought a substantial number of fights, but nothing that could prepare him for Gomez. For most opponents, their first meeting with Gomez signified an opportunity to face a legend, but there was one strategy that would work against him. Beto Martinez called me and said, "You want to fight for the title?" I told him right away, "Yes, I want it. I want it. I thought I was ready at the time," said Perez. "When someone offers you a shot to fight for the title, you have to take it. But at the time, I was only fighting in small venues in Las Vegas. I just didn't have enough experience." While Perez was busy processing this once-in-a-lifetime offer, Gomez was making his own predictions. After finding out that a heavyweight named Lee Savold held the record of 54 seconds for the fastest knockout, Gomez told a reporter, "Tell everyone to get there early if they want to see the new record." When the fighters finally met before the fight, Perez wanted to introduce himself, but that didn't happen. "Wilfredo started to curse me in English, and he didn't respect me," Perez said. "I told him, 'Come on, man, talk to me in Spanish, and please respect me.'" The hostility did not carry over into the fight, as the big night at the Garden did not produce fireworks. Gomez was making his third appearance at the Garden, and the influx of Puerto Ricans into New York helped make it an easy transition from San Juan. Conversely, Perez was making his Garden debut and was fulfilling the dreams of friends and family members. He said, "I remember watching fights with Muhammad Ali at Madison Square Garden. When I found out, I called all my friends in Chihuahua, Mexico. I was like, I am fighting at New York at the Garden. They all wanted me to send pictures. It was a big moment for me." After the first round ended, Gomez began to whittle away at Perez. In the second round, Perez came in with a nice straight right, but nothing much else, as Gomez set a slower but more comfortable pace. Gomez went to Perez's body with uppercuts that set up a right cross. Content to bide his time, Gomez did not display any sense of urgency. 2 rounds later, a methodical Gomez waited until the end of the round to open up his attack. He had already received a warning from referee Arthur McCanty Sr. for low blows and rabbit punches. With 5 seconds left in the fourth, Gomez softened up Perez with an uppercut to his neck and then casually nudged him down with his left hand. Perez was up by 6, but had to hustle to avoid more punishment as McCanty Sr. tried to figure out if the bell had been rung, which it had. When he got knocked down, I told him, "You gotta move, fake jab and then throw it, smother him. If you smother him, he can't do nothing." I didn't want Gomez to get at a comfortable distance, said Perez's manager, Jimmy Montoya. I knew Gomez was a puncher. I wanted Nico to use movement, and he was a good boxer, so I wanted him to box. I thought he could out-jab him. Nico had a strong jab. I wanted him to score a lot with that jab, but Wilfredo was just too strong for him. He was one of a kind. In comparison with previous defences, Gomez was composed. Thus, when the knockout punch finally arrived, the punch wasn't the culmination of Gomez stalking Perez. Instead, Gomez positioned himself so that when he landed the vicious left hook, he was walking away from Perez. The movement actually made the punch that much more impactful. A left and right to the head and neck, and down went Perez for the third time in the round. With Perez holding his neck, Mercanti Sr. called an end to the bout. Gomez explained his strategy when he said, "I let him land a few punches on me early so that he'd think it was easy to hit me and then come to me rather than me going to him. I heard that his strategy was to run circles around me and to make me chase him until I got tired." Later, Gomez also added, "The punch almost put his face through the mat." Then Gomez showed his more introspective side when he said, "Each time he went down, I studied him as if he were a work of art. He went down beautifully, no?" After the fight, Gomez was chronicled by a boxing writer. After his cornerman removed his glove, Gomez threw them to the writer and said, "Please put these in the Ring Hall of Fame." Gomez was then to let the writer get a glimpse of his charismatic side, as the reporter wrote. Less than 90 minutes after disposing of Perez, Gomez was walking out of the hotel room dressed in a baby blue suit. He looked more like a Latin lover than a Latin superfighter. But there was more. Few knew about the strong friendship with Roberto Duran, and Gomez received a call from him after tying the record. Gomez said, "Roberto, my good friend." After the conversation, an emotional Gomez said, "Great man, that Duran. Great man, great champion." Despite only lasting 5 rounds with Gomez, Perez would learn from his loss and continue to have a successful career. He said, "I made mistakes in that fight. My mum and dad didn't see that fight, but all my other family members came. They told me, 'You lost, but you fought for the title at Madison Square Garden and you got a chance to come to New York.' They all wanted to know the same thing. How was the plane? But I used that money to buy a house for my parents." Gomez, 23, who had made 10 title defences within a 27-month span, had now set his sights on the next possible opponent. He said, "I am going to destroy Davey Vasquez, slowly, but with great pleasure. I am going to box him for the first 3 or 4 or even 5 rounds and possibly extend him to the 8th or 9th or even 10th round just to teach him who's boss." The matchup with Danny Lopez was still on the horizon. Lopez needed to first get past Salvador Sanchez in February in order for the featherweight showdown to take place. Garden matchmaker Gil Clancy told a Sports Illustrated reporter, "It would be the first $1 million fight ever in the lower divisions, and it will happen." Clancy harbinged that fight would be a natural fit for the Garden, but Lopez's deep West Coast ties may send it elsewhere. As tough as Lopez was, he did not pose a big threat to a fighter like Gomez, who could punch in combinations, move well, and brawl when he had to. Reports suggested the fighters were set to meet at 126 pounds, a weight where Gomez claimed to feel most comfortable. It had always been a struggle for Gomez to make 122 pounds. Walking around at a much higher weight, Gomez knew a 4-pound increase would only be beneficial, even if his naysayers claimed that he was too short to carry that weight, and additionally, his power would not translate well at 126 pounds. He envisioned dollar signs wherever he heard Lopez's name and surmised that the purse would have to be closer to the $1 million range. Lopez's manager, Benny Giorgino, said, "Gomez says he wants $1 million. To me, that just shows he doesn't want to fight Danny." Recalling the discussion about his bout with Wilfredo, Lopez himself said, "I just went in and fought whomever my manager wanted me to." And he went with Salvador Sanchez. However, according to West Coast promoter and manager Don Shargin, it was not just the money factor. There were other hurdles that had to be overcome regarding the possible matchup. Shargin said, "They could never get together. Lopez wanted it in LA and Gomez wanted to have the fight in Puerto Rico. It was a big stumbling block." Sportscaster Rafael Bracero said, "I was in LA and I run into Danny Lopez and he said, 'Are you from Puerto Rico?' He told me he's got a fight with Wilfredo Gomez and he wanted me to send a message that he was going to beat Wilfredo. Then he told me that before he beat Wilfredo, he's got to beat a young Mexican fighter named Salvador Sanchez first. When I got back to Puerto Rico, I spoke to referee Waldemar Schmidt, who said Salvador Sanchez was young, but he will be one of the greatest fighters of all time." A couple of months after knocking out Perez, Gomez prepared to topple Duran's consecutive knockout record by beating Ruben Valdez from Colombia. Valdez hailed from an impressive boxing pedigree, as his cousin was former middleweight champion Rodrigo Valdez, who was given a number 2 ranking without any credentials other than winning his last 7 bouts against mostly obscure opponents. He came in with a record of 45-5-1 with 25 knockouts. There had been controversy as to whether he should have been even allowed to fight due to health issues. Gomez was looking for his 28th consecutive knockout victory, but more importantly, he was also well aware that he would be breaking Duran's record, and he acknowledged the significance. He said, "It was very important for me to break that record." Fans screamed, "Fight! Fight!" as Gomez moved comfortably to his right and then back to his left. Early on in the fight, Gomez could easily take risks with impunity. Gomez began to revert back to the left hook, to the body that had been so successful in past defences. Defensively, Gomez used lateral movement, shifted direction and mixed in a feint and then a counter. Ducking under to avoid a jab and then depositing a lightning 3-punch combination, Gomez dictated every movement of the bout. Each punch resonated as if hammering a wooden plank. Valdez winced at each precise offering and then haplessly shot a left hand as Gomez nearly lifted him off the ground with a 6-punch combination to close the round. Provoking Valdez, Gomez dropped his guard, jutted out his chin and challenged his opponent to offer some resistance. With a minute left in the round, Gomez connected with 4 punches, the most vicious being a left hook that turned Valdez's head. Valiant in the one-sided affair, but clearly a beaten and exhausted fighter, Valdez fought back in the last 30 seconds of the 4th round, but would not last much longer as Gomez pounded away in the 5th and had his way as he showed off his defensive wizardry and vicious bodywork in the 6th. At one point, Gomez unleashed a scary 3-punch combination that battered Valdez, but didn't knock him down. Having received a relentless beating in the 6th, Valdez didn't come out for the 7th. The fight would have ended sooner if Gomez had trained properly and did not have to wake up at 4:30 a.m. the previous day to sweat off, yet again, the excess weight, this time being 4.5 pounds. All 3 judges had Gomez comfortably winning at the time of the stoppage. Critics drew comparison between Duran and Gomez for their individual records. Duran had knocked his opponents out from 1973 to 1978. By maintaining his reign for 6 years with no threat of being dethroned, Duran set a standard for lightweights. He beat the following fighters on his way to establishing the knockout record: Jimmy Robertson, Hector Thompson, Ishimatsu Shizuke, Esteban De Jesus, Masataka Takayama, Ray Lampkin, Leniso Ortiz, Lou Bizarro, Alvaro Rojas and Villamar Fernandez. In comparison, Gomez started his streak in 1977 with a 5th-round knockout of Raul Tirado and then continued on a torrid pace until his record-breaking knockout of Valdez. Along the way, Gomez also stopped Royal Kobayashi, Juan Antonio Lopez, Sakad Pontavi, Leo Cruz, Carlos Zarate, Nestor Baba Jimenez, Julio Hernandez, Carlos Mendoza and Nico Perez. Both fighters had a mutual respect for each other and would later become close friends. Gomez's knockouts often arrived earlier while Duran usually occurred in the later rounds. They were both fortunate to have relatively easy defences mixed in with some difficult opponents. Hardly breaking a sweat, Gomez faced a kickboxer in Pontavi and Duran barely unleashed one combination before Alvaro Rojas lay flat on the canvas. Duran's toughest opponent was Esteban De Jesus. In contrast, Gomez took down Carlos Zarate. Similarly, Duran was physically drained by a bigger, stronger challenger in Ray Lampkin before he brutally knocked him out in the 14th round. 3 years later, Gomez faced a similar challenge in another physically impressive opponent, Leonardo Cruz, who stuck around until the 13th round. Also, Duran faced some guys such as Lou Bizarro and Villamar Fernandez, who only wanted to dance, while Gomez never faced any true slicksters. Gomez aligned with the WBC, fought mostly title fights so he could accumulate knockouts in a much shorter period of time. But on the other hand, Duran took a host of non-title fights along the way. Unfortunately, they never faced each other because of the significant weight difference. But both streaks were impressive on their own merit. However, the one-sided victory over Valdez was bittersweet because a day prior to the bout, the possible super fight with Danny Lopez quickly vanished. Even though Gomez finally got the fight, he was patiently waiting for, a new reality setting as Salvador Sanchez stopped Lopez in 13 rounds on the 2nd of February and then returned in the rematch that June to stop him again in 14 rounds. Not only did Sanchez destroy Lopez's dream of becoming a champion again, but he ruined Gomez's opportunity to make a big payday. Gomez responded to the loss by saying, "I was disappointed when Lopez lost. I will box as a featherweight and also defend my title as a junior bantamweight." Since Sanchez did not speak English and did not rely on an attacking style, the showdown with Gomez was a gem for boxing purists, but not the casual fan. "I remember Wilfredo as a strong fighter with great stamina," said Lopez, who was the odd man out of the featherweight equation after his losses to Sanchez. "I don't want to say if it would have been a better fight with Wilfredo because Salvador was good in his own way and Wilfredo was good in his own way. I think most people thought that my fights with Salvador were going to be super fights, but I am not sure if it turned out that way or not." Next up for Gomez was lightly regarded Eddie Nduku from Nigeria. The fight, a 12-round featherweight non-title bout, was held at Hiram-Bothorn Stadium on the 27th of April 1980, 2 months after Gomez destroyed Valdez. The fight was nationally televised on ABC and promoted by Salinas Promotions. Little was known about Nduku, who had only 15 fights, all victories, going into the title defence. Nduku, ranked the number 2 featherweight by the WBC, was generously catapulted to a top 5 ranking despite not having one significant victory against a named fighter besides David Cote. In other words, Nduku had no right to be challenging for a world title, let alone be ranked in the top 25. He was merely a precursor for Gomez to ease his way into a showdown with Sanchez. However, Gomez may have benefited by facing a more credible challenger as he prepared for the biggest fight in his career. Gabby Penagarciano said, "At the time, African fighters were well respected because of Azuma Nelson. He had a following as well. There were few and far between, but all the ones that rose to the top were good fighters and very good people. So, any time the name of an African boxer came up, it was seriously considered. At the time, the WBC had a huge campaign against apartheid." During the 3 a.m. Sunday weigh-in, controversy yet again erupted. Why the camps agreed on an early morning weigh-in was never made clear. First, Nduku stepped on the scale and easily made 126 pounds. Then Gomez stepped on the scale and jumped off before his weight could be confirmed by officials. According to several reports, Gomez never stepped on the scale again after that incident. There was a rumour that Jose Suleiman had Salinas Promotions take purse money from Gomez and transfer it to Nduku as compensation, but it was never confirmed by either Gomez or Montoya. That same evening, things got worse for Nduku. Instead of getting rest before the biggest fight in his career, he realised that he was not alone. Jimmy Montoya said Nduku had all his fights in Africa. He came over and he wasn't a puncher. Funniest thing, or the worst thing, is that Gomez's guys kept Nduku up all night by going over and knocking on his door and calling his room. I finally moved him to my room and I took his room, and when they came in I was like, "What the hell are you doing? Get the hell out of here." Whatever occurred the night before and whomever orchestrated the late night house calls, one thing was for certain, Nduku did not have a chance against Gomez. No gift ranking was going to change the fact that there was a huge disparity in talent level, and that was clear during the first round of the fight. At no time in the fight did he pose a threat to Gomez. Despite the shenanigans that occurred at the weigh-in, by the time of the bout, no one was too concerned about Nduku's psyche, as he nearly flipped out of the ring from a Gomez right hand in the 4th and final round. From the opening bell, Nduku appeared unstable and glaringly tight. Early on, every punch that Gomez landed appeared to sting Nduku. Since he always went back and never moved side to side, Gomez had an easy time finding range. Within the first minute of the round, Gomez clipped him with a right hand and Nduku stumbled, more off balance than hurt. In the closing seconds of the first round, Gomez landed a barrage of punches that glanced off Nduku, but he escaped to his left and off the ropes. Nduku had survived the round, but the unwillingness to fight back became a micronism of the next couple of rounds. A round later, Gomez in the middle of the ring stepped in range and landed a 3-punch left-right-left combination, with the left doing the most damage. Nduku went to his back and the referee, Ray Solis, stepped over to begin the count. A concerned Ndukwu rose at the count of 6, and they gave Solis clearance to continue. A cautious Gomez charged Ndukwu, careful not to walk into a stray counter. Not long after the first knockdown, Gomez picked off a jab and landed his own short left hook that he stepped into. Ndukwu went down again. This time he received an 8 count, but Ndukwu was not severely hurt despite the frequency of the knockdowns. As the bell sounded, Ndukwu, still on his feet, survived 3 whipping hooks that were more powerful than any of the knockdown punches, only compounding the issue. He couldn't outbox or outslug Gomez, so the urgency also stemmed from desperation. Boxing beautifully, Gomez glided round the ring and used quick feints to confuse Ndukwu in the 3rd round. As the round closed out, Gomez clipped Ndukwu again with a left hook and then jammed him with a strong jab. Infused with a sense of pride, Ndukwu returned fire and even landed a couple of jabs. Either way, he, at least for 1 round, proved that he was capable of fighting back. Jimmy Montoya said between the rounds, the only thing Ndukwu said was, "I feel weak," and he punches hard. I told him to move around, don't back straight up, and you've got to counter. Ndukwu didn't have the power, so Gomez really felt comfortable. Clearly no longer a threat, Ndukwu could not implement any attack either. As broadcaster Howard Cosell bluntly put it, Ndukwu has every indication of being a nice kid. The problem is, he can't fight. Gomez had nearly closed Ndukwu's left eye heading into the 4th round. Early in the round, Gomez hit Ndukwu so hard with a right hand that it sent the fighter through the middle rope and nearly flipped him completely over. Surprisingly, Gomez ran over to catch him, a gesture that brought smiles to the local fans. He said, "I caught him so I could hit him again." Solis ran over to Ndukwu, who was up by 7. It was only a matter of time. After one more Gomez flurry, Ndukwu absorbed a left hook to the body and began to run away from Gomez. Cocking back his fist, Gomez lunged towards Ndukwu as if he was ready for one more knockout punch, but the Nigerian went to his knees and grabbed his side. Solis immediately stepped in to stop the bout at 1 minute and 58 seconds of the round. Howard Cosell apologised to a live audience, in his words, for a public and national embarrassment. Gomez's trainer revealed what everyone else was thinking when he said he wasn't even in Wilfredo's class. Wilfredo was tremendous. Despite the obvious mismatch, Gomez put on a clinic. Even if Ndukwu did not provide resistance, Gomez still looked impressive at 126 pounds, as the speed and power were still evident. As for the weight controversy, Ndukwu told a reporter that he put in a complaint with a WBC official but never heard anything more about it. Wilfredo was one of a kind. I have a lot of respect for him. In the ring he was an animal. He was going to come after you, and I love fighters like that. He was a tough cookie, said Jimmy Montoya. Racking up his title defences at an alarming rate, WBC Super Bantamweight champ Wilfredo Gomez prepared to meet Derek Holmes on the 22nd of August 1980 for his 12th defence. The title fight, held at Caesars Sports Pavilion, was televised by NBC on its Friday Night Fights programme. Going into the bout, Holmes was ranked 8th by the WBC. The champion was now 29-0-1 with 29 knockouts. A day away from his 25th birthday, Holmes, the underdog, benefited from beating Gomez in the amateurs by knockout on the 20th of July 1974 in Milwaukee, Illinois, in the first round for the North American Amateur Super Bantamweight title. Holmes was 129-10 with 75 knockouts in an amazing amateur career where he earned the nickname Holmes Sweet Holmes. Nevertheless, as familiar as they were with each other's style, Holmes only had 15 professional bouts to prepare for one of the best fighters in the world. Ironically, according to Holmes, it was Gomez who had encouraged him to turn professional. Gomez said, "I wanted revenge for the loss in the amateurs. I was going in for the kill. I had a thorn in my side, a grudge. He was a strong fighter who knew how to move well. He hit hard." Utilising his reach advantage in the first round, the 5'7" Holmes flicked his jab and moved away from Gomez's vaunted right hand. Even though Gomez landed an effective right hand in the last minute of the round, it was a straight right hand by Holmes that defined the round. In response to the punch, Gomez reacted wildly, urging Holmes to come to get him. It was typical of Gomez to react in such a manner and proved that the punch may have not hurt him, but definitely got his attention. After a perfectly crafted first round, Holmes made the decision to stop moving and stand and trade with Gomez. The tactic worked brilliantly for the challenger as he staggered Gomez with 20 seconds left in the round. Another strong right hand and Gomez would have been knocked down. This was not the Gomez that fans had grown fond of during his championship reign. Instead of coming out quickly, Gomez waited patiently, and the approach backfired. Being passive wasn't his style. It was during this round that Gomez landed a punch that broke Holmes' jaw and would send him to a Las Vegas hospital immediately after the fight. Courageously, Holmes fought on. Hurt early and not following his usual strategy, Gomez was slowly losing his grip on the fight. Holmes nailed Gomez to start the third round with a huge left uppercut and then another straight right that also landed cleanly. Then came the onslaught of knockdowns. First, Holmes went down from the impact of a punch, but the knockdown was ruled a slip by the referee Joey Curtis. Then, still in the third round, Holmes went to the canvas again to avoid further punishment. Gomez closed the round with a huge left hook, which was his best punch of the fight. Gomez's violent attacks continued over the next 2 rounds. In the first of 4 knockdowns of the fourth round, Gomez floored Holmes with a left hook to start the round and then proceeded to stand over him and taunt him with his gloves to get up. "Stand up. I am going for the kill. I want to finish you," Gomez said he was telling Holmes at the time. Having risen at 8, Holmes quickly went down again seconds later from the impact of 2 jarring left hooks. Invigorated, Gomez was not content. He was still not finished. Gomez zeroed in on Holmes with a huge straight right, which he hammered down on the challenger for a third knockdown of the round. Clearly out of the fight at this point, Holmes walked over to the corner under his own cognition and took a knee from a fourth knockdown. Despite a subtle play and discouraged look from Holmes to end his torment, Curtis refused to accept the reality of what had become so obvious to the crowd. Another right hand and Holmes fell helplessly into the ropes for the 5th time and final knockdown of the round. The 3 knockdown rule had been waived before the fight, and it continued. If Curtis wasn't convinced by the previous 6 knockdowns that Holmes had had enough, then Gomez would make sure that the 5th round would be the end. In fact, Gomez intensified his attack in the 5th as he trapped Holmes along the ropes and landed a 6-punch combination that sent him down again. Coping with a cut and an indifferent referee, Holmes rose again late in the count and even landed one more right hand before finally succumbing to a pulverising right hand in the middle of the ring. As he rested on his elbows, Holmes listened to the count and watched his corner throw in the white towel. Referee Curtis finally called the bout at 2 minutes and 29 seconds of the 5th round, and egregiously tried after the fight to rationalise his decision to wait for the 8th knockdown to call the fight. And even then, he didn't make the final decision. After the fight, Gomez didn't mince his words or try to refute any talk that Holmes gave him more trouble than any previous defences. He said, "He really hurt me with the right hand, but I was in very good shape and I can take a punch." Later, Holmes readily admitted, "I feel like I have no jaw. He's much stronger than I thought." Gomez lamented the fact that Holmes' camp made a mistake by putting Holmes in there after only a handful of fights. "It was far too early for him," said Gomez. Gomez would then announce that he would not relinquish the title and move to the featherweight division for a shot at Salvador Sanchez until a deal was confirmed. He told a reporter, "Until I am sure I am fighting for the featherweight crown, I won't vacate my title." Even then, it was not clear if Gomez was willing to part with the belt. In that regard, Gomez was very shrewd. He was not one to be pushed around. The victory gave Gomez the new record for consecutive defence knockouts, with 12. If Gomez decided to vacate his title, 122-pounders Mike Ayala and Juan Antonio Lopez would then vie for the 122-pound belt. 4 months after engaging in a knockdown brawl with Derek Holmes, Gomez signed to make his 13th title defence against Colombia's Jose "Kid" Pambalito Cervantes in Miami on the 13th of December 1980. Gomez, 30-0, with 1 draw and 30 knockouts, would earn between $250,000 and $300,000 for his defence. Coming in with a record of 22-7-4 with 10 KOs, Cervantes, weighing 120 pounds, had fought and lost to the likes of Ruben Olivares and former champ Dong Kyun Yum, and had recently beaten countryman Ruben Valdez for the lightly regarded WBC Fairbox Super Bantamweight crown. The showdown with Gomez would take place at High Ally Fronton in Miami, which held nearly 4,000 people. Weight problems again persisted as Gomez was still hovering around the £127 mark in the week of the fight. In the corner before the fight, Cervantes did a little jig when his name was announced and even playfully patted Gomez on the head during the pre-fight instructions. Although in his previous defence he allowed Holmes to take the lead at times, he immediately attacked Cervantes in the opening round. As Gomez pondered each move, the challenger awkwardly moved in a jerky style that made it an unappealing and fragmented first round. Each time Gomez tried to enter the fray and engage Cervantes, it ended in a clinch. Cervantes proved too cumbersome in his movements for Gomez to land the jab or combinations. With this type of opponent, Gomez knew that if he found one punch, that would be all it would need. Thus, he positioned himself for that knockout punch. A round later, Gomez landed a devastating right hand that collapsed Cervantes towards the end of the second round. Although Cervantes popped up immediately and showed awareness, his legs said otherwise. Gomez pressured him to close the show and responded with another right cross and hook. Neither fighter nor the referee, Ishmael Quinones Falou, heard the bell as the cornerman and the referee rushed to stop Gomez from inflicting any more punishment. Still, Gomez managed to finish the combination he had started, and Cervantes even slipped in a punch of his own. Cat-quick Gomez pounced on Cervantes at the start of the third round and smothered him as he looked to land one more right hand. Realising the end was near, Cervantes intensified his attack, hoping to catch Gomez with a lucky punch. He had no other recourse, nor the resources to keep Gomez at bay for the remainder of the fight. For most fighters, facing Gomez on the prowl often led to dire consequences, and luck was all they could rely on. In that third round, Gomez softened Cervantes up with an early right and left, and then ended the fight with a crunching short left hook that left Cervantes face first on the canvas. He did not rise before the 10 count. Referee Falou called about at 1 minute and 50 seconds of the third round. The defence against Cervantes was not taxing for Gomez, who had made a habit of going into the late rounds to knock out more competitive opponents. After the victory, Don King had already begun promoting the showdown with Salvador Sanchez that was signed a month earlier. But for now, Gomez had his mind elsewhere. In order to get one more tune-up bout before the mega fight, Gomez faced Raul Silva on June the 20th, 1981 in San Juan. It marked the first time that Gomez relied on his own promotional company. Silva came in with 7 victories and 11 losses to go with 2 draws. Around this time, Gomez had gotten married. When Gomez threw his right hand in the first round, it was almost like he took a bunny step into the punch and then stepped back too quickly for Silva to counter. That right hand was necessary in the first round against Silva, as Gomez shot punches through Silva's guard and then stepped to his left to open up room for his left hooks to the body. Refusing to give up, Silva showed heart, but it was barely enough to get him out of the second round when he went down from 3 vicious left hooks to the body. Silva was saved by the bell and headed back to his corner. But he did not get a reprieve, as he was knocked down again from a 4-punch combination, at which point the referee, Ishmael Quinones Falou, finally stepped in to call an end to the bout at 51 seconds of the third round. So now he's got this victory, we move in to the conversation around Salvador Sanchez. Now the negotiations for the Sanchez bout actually took their toll on Gomez. Several different instances began to weigh on him. An early sign that he wasn't himself was when he and a friend approached Don King to sign a contract without an advisor present. Marquez Gomez said, when Wilfredo went with a friend to sign that contract without legal advice, he made a big mistake. I suggested that we go to court to void the contract. The quantity of the purse was not enough. It was not a lot of money to fight Sanchez. Wilfredo agreed with me about that. Then he asked me, should I have signed that contract? But at that point, it was already signed, so it didn't matter. By all accounts, it was not the Wilfredo Gomez that so many people knew and loved. The absence of Chide left a gaping hole in his professional life. As a redoute as his advisors were, it was difficult to fill that gap. Marquez Gomez again said, I told Wilfredo that he needed to go and talk to King politely and tell him it is not a good amount. I also told him to tell King that it would not be good for anyone to begin litigation that would delay the fight a couple of years, and by then, Wilfredo would not be in great shape to fight. I wanted him to explain to King nicely that they shouldn't block the fight, but Wilfredo didn't listen. The litigation was handled through a Puerto Rican court, and Gomez won the right to void the contract. It actually marked a landmark victory for Gomez and his team, but it also delayed the fight. The court case related to the contract that Wilfredo signed with Don King without any counsel. The theory used in the case was that Gomez did not know English and did not understand the clauses and conditions of the contract. The court ruled in favour of Wilfredo and annulled the contract. Of all the advisors and other members of Gomez's team, it was Ishmael Sanchez's work that proved invaluable. Most of Gomez's team members would eventually fade away, but Sanchez was always with him, even in the end. He said, "I picked up the purses of cash from each fight, did the deposits and paid other members of the team, manager, lawyer and assistants, whoever Gomez offered to pay. We were in charge of the ticket office of Pavilion Sports Promotion, a promotional company that Wilfredo had with Ishmael Leandre and the licensed Lorenz Santini. At least Gomez fought 2 bouts under that promotional company. I did the inversions at brokerage houses and prepared the income tax return. I negotiated some of his purses for his fights and participated in the auction of the fight Gomez versus Juan Laporte. The best part of my job with Wilfredo was that he had a lot of confidence in me and always followed my advice and recommendations. The most difficult part was to attend to the people approaching him to get a benefit for being a friend or because they knew him. There were many women and men that tried to get money for his friendship or relationship, and with my intervention, if he referred them to me, they could not do it. As advisors, managers and hangers-on drifted in and out of the camp, one thing was clearly missing: the presence of Yamil Chade. Adrift in a sea of bad decisions and indecisiveness, Gomez accepted the advice of lawyers Gabi Pengarciano and Paco Valcasel and agreed that he did not need a manager. In other fights, Gomez could navigate the labyrinth path that divided the roles of boxer and manager, but against Sanchez, and faced with a firestorm of controversy, Gomez sorely missed Chade to accomplish the task that he, the boxer, now had to take care of. Initially, Pengarciano convinced Gomez that the move would help him financially, but it was not worth the time Gomez spent fulfilling the duties that Chade accomplished with ease. Gomez said, "In 1978 my contract with Chade ended. I lost a lot of contacts. I was a free agent and my accountant, Ishmael Sanchez, made contracts with different promoters. I no longer decided to stay and work with Chade. There were pros and cons. A manager takes a lot of money, but at the end of the day your manager can guide you better against bad deals. It affected me a lot because now I had to talk to all the different lawyers, doctors and do all of the legwork. The complexity of the relationships between boxers and managers are often fraught with too many lawyers to begin to understand. Some managers feel comfortable as father figures, but that type of intimacy is difficult to maintain as the fighter attempts to comprehend how to deal with fame and manage money. What made it more difficult for Chade was that Gomez was content to micromanage the inner workings of the physical responsibilities and the financial stresses. In many regards, the decision is one that Gomez still regrets. He said, "Yes, it was bad. I wanted to handle it myself." Chade said, very wisely, that it was crazy, that I thought I could manage myself. And he was right. According to Chade, Gomez had ulterior motives for refusing to renew his contract that had nothing to do with saving money legitimately. Chade said, "I am certain that Gomez, whom I took straight to the top in a very short time, did not renew our contract for 4 years in 1977 because he thought I was charging the promoter, usually Don King, an amount that was destined to his purse." Chade actually wrote in his autobiography, Low Blows, however, Gomez exhibited a lucid understanding of the business side of the sport and recognised that Chade was expendable. Plus, there were too many scenarios where Gomez was forced to re-examine a situation where Chade may not have been honest with his dealings. What he did not factor in was all of Chade's other skills. Without Chade by his side and Val Terrell taking the reins, the final negotiations were confirmed and the fight was signed for the 21st of August 1981. After a hostile initial meeting on the 18th of March with Gomez, Suleiman, King, Sanchez, his trainer and his manager in Las Vegas, Val Terrell was able to calm the waters and get the contract signed. However, tempers flared before the opening bell. Cristobal Rosas, Sanchez's manager, was staring at Gomez, and he said something to Gomez. Valcarel recalled the situation, and he said, "The next thing I know, Gomez went after Rosas and Sanchez, who at the time were sitting side by side. I knew that Gomez was faking because he wanted to intimidate them, but Suleiman jumped up and headed to the other side of the table. I held Gomez and King was in the middle of Sanchez and Rojas." That was the end of the conversation. That was it right there. Later in March, we went to Mexico City and had a meal in a restaurant. Suleiman invited everybody. Let me tell you, after what happened in the room, Sanchez wasn't there this time. It was just me, Don King and Suleiman. Sanchez and Rosas didn't make the trip. Wilfredo could not speak English, but Suleiman could speak English, and so could Jose Torres Landa. I explained the discussion to Wilfredo. We wanted close to $1 million. We got close to that. We got a piece of the fight fee. We got a guaranteed $450,000 and about 35% of the closed-circuit revenue. Still, casting a pall over the fight itself was the fact, as Sanchez was beginning his rigorous training sessions, Gomez was finishing off a cruise. He received an urgent call from co-promoter Don King to return home immediately. It was only one element of a domino effect that seemed to worsen by the day. Gomez pleaded with King to do anything in his power to postpone the bout. However, with only a little over a month before the fight, it proved impossible. Gomez would recall the situation about that cruise and he said, "Don King couldn't find me, and then I get this phone call on the boat. I was on my honeymoon with my wife and I answered the phone. I wanted him to postpone it because I didn't have enough time to train for the bout. I wasn't concerned about Sanchez. He wasn't a big puncher. He had already sold it and everything was paid for and ready to go. He didn't want to lose money. He didn't care who won the fight." Not everyone was sold on Gomez facing Sanchez. Although lawyer Gabby Penagarciano Sr. left on good terms as Gomez's lawyer before the historic bout, he did have some parting advice. He said, "He was the bravest boxer I had ever seen. But I was opposed to that fight. Don King was insistent about him signing. I advised him against it. He was being led down a primrose path by people who would nurse his ego, treating him as if he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't think he was committed to a regime that would allow him to fight at the height of his ability, nor was he a featherweight." As elevated as Gomez had become in boxing circles, he was still sharing centre stage with the great Latin fighters of any generation, with Roberto Duran and Alexis Arguello. By 1981, Duran was still grappling with the backlash from his loss to Sugar Ray Leonard in New Orleans, and Arguello was busy preparing for an eventual showdown with Aaron Pryor. Ironically, Duran and Gomez were close friends, but it was now Gomez's turn to get out from under his shadow and stop jostling with him for position as the best Latin fighter in the world. Showtime commentator Steve Farhod said Gomez was a victim of incredible talent during the 1970s and early 80s. Duran and Arguello were on TV all the time. There was not much room for him to break through. He didn't speak English. Duran got by with his English. I don't think Gomez had a clear profile. In America, he just wasn't known. There was one other factor. At 122 pounds, people were wondering, what's a junior featherweight? There had never been a great junior featherweight, and there were not any American contenders at 122. Latin fighters owed a distinction of being illustrious for their heart, courage and ability to sidestep poverty at its peak. Duran, Arguello, Wilfred Benitez and Carlos Monzon, and now Gomez was entering that fraternity of fabulous Latin talents who transcended the sport. Gomez survived the toughest areas and looked to become the next 126-pound great. He wasn't a gentleman like Arguello, an aggressive force like Duran, or as enchanted by the famous Benitez and Monzon, yet he walked with a swagger that couldn't be mistaken. Gomez knew he was great, and was determined to show it each time he came into the ring. Puerto Rico had fallen in love with him the same way they did with other legends. Within the context of that love affair, the Puerto Rican fan had high expectations that needed to be met, and Gomez had to live up to them. Now it's at this point we are going to pause for the end of part 2, and get ready for what comes in part 3. Of course, we've left it at the point now, guys, where he's about to get in the ring with the great, the legendary Salvador Sanchez. We will cover that fight and other parts of his career in the next part of the Wilfredo Gomez career profile. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's given you another great insight into how far along in his career he has come. He's beaten Duran's successive knockout defence record. I mean, it's a great statistic to be able to beat, isn't it, with Roberto Duran at that time as well. And he's fighting in America. He's working with the likes of Don King. He's starting to get a little bit of notoriety. But as you heard, Steve Farhood said the difficulty he had was that the 122-pound division really didn't have a grasp of fighters in there that was well known to the wider audiences of boxing. And I think that was the great difficulty for him at the time. But he'd put himself on a pedestal where he was renowned as an absolute fantastic fighter. He was undefeated. No one had beaten him. No one had really come close to really beating him at this point of his career. So as we move into part 3 and we cover the Salvador Sanchez fight and other notable fights, you will get to hear more about how Wilfredo Bazooka Gomez's career plays out. Now, if you've enjoyed this particular episode, as always, please do leave a comment on Spotify if you're listening via that podcasting app. If you are listening via Apple, please leave a rating and leave a review. If you've not followed us on social media, I mentioned it at the top of the show, you can follow us all across social media. The easiest way to do it is probably typing in BTR Boxing Podcast Network, although on X I do have a career_profiles tag, so you can follow us on there. Mainly, we use Facebook and TikTok and we use Instagram. They're the main 3 that get used, but we are also across the other social media networks as well. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you to those that have subscribed to us through Patreon as well. We've got a great handful of people on there that have been very, very loyal and supportive to the podcast through its transitional period. This year has been difficult with the loss of Johnston and bringing Jamie in, and Jamie not being able to bring the same level of counterpartness that I had with Johnston. And this is why I'm glad that you guys are still enjoying the show, and I really appreciate all the comments that are coming in. So thank you for sticking with us. I do hope you are enjoying the show. If you've got any thoughts and feelings, please continue to make them known. It really, really does help. I will continue to put all sorts of great stuff out on social media with different fights, different things related to some of these fighters that we're covering on these shows. So please continue to support in that way. If you're not a patron and you can support us by going to patreon.com, please go and check it out, because I do release these episodes early for those that subscribe to us through Patreon. They're all ad-free, so they're not subjected to any ad insertions into them as well. And we do have content on there that hasn't been released to the general public. There's been some great stuff that I've done with Johnston in the past that is still out there, that's never been released. So it would be good for you guys to get the additional content if you can support us by subscribing on Patreon. If you can't, just continue to share everything that goes on social media. It's all truly, truly appreciated. And that is it for part 2. We will be back with part 3 on the career profile of Wilfredo Bazooka Gomez on the BTR Boxing Podcast Network.